justice work. Now, the Public Service Partnership for Public Service and Georgetown University Law Center. Thanks to all of them for working together with us to put the program together and to spread the word so that all of you could be here tonight. The Washington Council of Lawyers is a voluntary bar association. We're dedicated to promoting pro bono service to the public interest practice of law. So our members are lawyers, law students, legal professionals across all the different sectors of the legal marketplace. So people from academia, people from law firms, from government agencies, and from public interest organizations, because there is so much more that we can do when we are working together and collaborating to improve the access to justice than when each sector is siloed in its own individual little unit. So we work to put on programs like this to inform people and to build a community so that more can be accomplished to help those in need. I want to be sure to invite you to some of the other Washington Council of Lawyers events coming up later this summer. Next week we have a Brown Day about using impact litigation and advocacy to create systemic change, looking at affordable housing as a case study. That is available on our website, as well as later fair week after that, which is a happy hour at the Washington Tavern with law students and lawyers who are all interested in public interest. Both of these events are something you can learn about on our website, which is www.legislatylawyers.org. I need to say a huge thank you for this program to Lena Bauman, who is at UDC Davis Current School of Law. She is a member of the board of directors of the Washington Council of Lawyers and really had the inspiration and poured so much time and energy and thoughtfulness into bringing our panelists together and putting the program together and publicizing it. And so, Lena, thank you very much for that. Your thoughtfulness and inspiration has been really remarkable. I am supposed to tell you all that we are going to be live tweeting the program tonight, and you can follow that conversation with the hashtag Fellows1313.
Watch Lawyers is our Twitter.
And our Twitter handle is @WatchLawyers. Hopefully there will be a shortified of the event afterwards, and if all goes well, YouTube video as well. So if you have friends who weren't able to make it, or you go back to your law school and want to revisit something that you heard tonight, there should be a way to do that through our website. Just a quick query. How many of you are going to law school someplace other than DC and are just here for the time?
Wow.
Well, I invite you, even if you're not in DC, to join the Washington Council of Lawyers if you think you might come back here. $25 to join as a law student. You'll get a monthly public interest job clearinghouse that will tell you about public interest jobs in DC, but also all around the country. And we offer a program like this for when you graduate, and after you graduate, a program called our mentorship program, which you have to be a member in order to participate in. So if you're thinking about coming back to DC, it's worth it to stay connected and hear about what's going on and kind of hear the ground by joining Washington. So, you all want to hear about fellowships, so I'm going to stop now and turn the program over to Morgan Lynn, who is one of our hosts from here at Georgetown University Law Center, who will introduce the rest of the panelists and get started on the program. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Welcome to Georgetown. Welcome back to those of you who are students out in the world, not coming here every day this summer. And welcome for those of you who've traveled a ways to get to your DC summer placements. We're really excited about tonight's event. We're going to be talking about a whole handful of post-grad opportunities that you can be seeking out, either project-based fellowships, staff attorney fellowships, positions with the government through honors programs or the PMF program. So lots of different fellowship options, lots of different things for you to be considering right now. But to so our panelists can have a sense of what exactly you're considering right now, how many of you are Rising 3Ls? And keep your hand up if you're in the process of preparing a fellowship application or planning on doing that. Fantastic. How many of you are Rising 2Ls hoping to endeavor in this next year? Fabulous. And practicing attorneys who are thinking about the fellowship route or some of these entry-level programs? Wonderful. Welcome all. Really excited about the panel that we have. The first panelist who's going to talk is Sterling Morris. She's from Equal Justice Works. She's the manager of fellowships and advancement at EJW, and she's going to talk some about the EJW process specifically, what you as an applicant could be looking for, and what you should be doing to prepare for a fantastic application through them. Next, we're going to hear from Hillary Schneller, who's currently an EJW fellow. She's sponsored by Greenberg Traurig and doing work on health and reproductive rights at the National Women's Law Center. So she's going to talk some about her experiences becoming a fellow and when she was sitting in your shoes, what she was thinking about and the process she got to go through to get to where she is now. Next, you're going to hear from David Zisser, who's at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law. He works there in the Community Development Project, and he's going to talk to you some about the Lawyers Committee's different entry-level opportunities for new attorneys. So their fellowships, their staff attorney fellowships, their in-house projects, their school-based fellowship projects, all the different ways that you could potentially work for an organization like the Lawyers Committee. And he's going to talk some from the employer's perspective about what they're looking for from you. And last, we're going to hear from Katie DeHon, who's going to talk some about, she's at the Partnership for Public Service, and she's going to talk some about the Presidential Management Fellows Program and different government honors programs that are open for entry-level attorneys. So I will turn it over to Sterling to start the program.
Sure. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to put a little shout out. Is anyone here from Georgetown? Perfect. So I graduated from Georgetown 2 years ago, so I'm happy to be back at my alma mater. And as Morgan said, my name is Sterling Morris. I'm a manager of fellowships and advancement at Equal Justice Works. So what Equal Justice Works is we're a nonprofit that's dedicated to mobilizing the next generation of public interest attorneys. And what we do is we partner with law schools, of which we have about 200 member schools currently. We partner with law firms, corporate legal departments, other nonprofit organizations. We advocate for more public interest programming at law schools. We help to create postgraduate and summer public interest opportunities, job opportunities, and we also help address the staggering educational debt that often precludes lawyers from actually even considering public service. So at the end of the my presentation, you'll see our website. I encourage you to go there for any of your educational debt questions, anything like that, because I know that that's something that is 100% on everyone's mind that is here tonight. So what I'm going to be talking about today is our 2 postgraduate fellowship programs. So if you are passionate about public interest law and you have a particular project or an issue that you're really interested in, but you don't have the funding, maybe there's not a position at the nonprofit that you're looking at, that's what we try to do, is we fill that gap. The main opportunity that I'm going to be talking about today is our Equal Justice Works Fellowship. We call them our traditional fellowships. They're privately funded. It is the largest postgraduate legal fellowship in the U.S. It requires a 2-year commitment to work at a nonprofit implementing a project that you yourself, the fellow, designs. So the stat that we're the most excited about is the fact that more than 80% of our fellows continue on in public interest, even if it's not with their original host organization. That's over time. So the purpose of the fellowship is really to create a public interest career. We're trying to launch you. So we're very proud of that number. And then the other number that we're very proud of is how many fellows we get to put in the field every year. It varies based on the number of sponsors that we're able to get each year. In 2012, we had 50 fellows that started, and Hillary is one of the 2012 fellows. She started in last September. This year, in 2 months, in September 2013, a new 57 fellows will be joining her. So we're hoping to grow that number as the years keep going. So just to give you a sense of where we are in the annual application cycle, for you Rising 3Ls, this is perfect time for you to hear this. Because our application actually just opened on Monday on our website, and the application will close on September 17th at 5 p.m. Between now and then, as you're preparing your application, we're going to be having multiple webinars, and you can look on our website. Our program manager, Sarah Snick, puts those on. They get very detailed. I don't have enough time to go into all the detail that she will give you, but it's very specific pointers on how to put the best application forward. So back to the fellowship itself, there are 4 components to any Equal Justice Works fellowship. The first is the project. So the project is a new, and I want to emphasize new, project that focuses on legal advocacy for a disenfranchised group or potentially maybe an issue that's not adequately addressed in our legal system today. So because the goal is to create new public interest careers and positions, our fellowships do not fund general staff attorneys. Instead, the project should provide the fellow with the opportunity to exercise leadership on a discrete project. So preference is given to projects that are designed to impact a large number of people, or that creates a program that can be replicated, like a model that you can replicate in different communities, or that creates a long-lasting institution or a program. As for issue area, any issue area pretty much is considered, except our 2 conditions are that the project needs to be in the US and standard criminal defense work cannot be funded. You can work in criminal defense, however. You can work on systemic issues like sentencing guidelines for a specific underfunded population or underrepresented population. Second component is the candidate. That's you guys. So our candidates, and anyone that's eligible is a third-year law student, a recent law grad, or an experienced private sector attorney that has graduated or will be graduating from a law school that's a member of Equal Justice Works. Most law schools are. So unless you go to a very obscure law school, the chances are you're a member. You can check on our website for that. While there's no limit on the number of years out of law school that an applicant may have, the program does aim to create, like I've been saying, a new public interest career. So we strongly encourage recent graduates to apply. You should also note that bar passage is not required at the time that the application is due. For many of you, you won't have even finished your 3rd year of law school. But bar requirements they vary by your host organization. So whenever you're looking into who you want to host your project, be thinking about that ahead of time. And speaking of the host organization, this is the nonprofit organization where your fellowship will actually be housed. It's where you will be an employee. The nonprofit must be a 501c3 or a 501c4 nonprofit, and they have to be able to provide training, support, and then any other benefits that any other staff member gets, like health benefits, fringe benefits. Now, the candidate, you don't have to have a specific personal tie to the organization, but it does help your application if you've interned there before, or you can demonstrate in your application that you have a strong connection, that you've worked closely with the organization to create the application. And we actually grade the host organizations based on our knowledge of the strength of the organization and their ability to support you both during and after the fellowship. And last but not least is the sponsors. The sponsors can be a law firm, a corporation, bar foundation, family foundation. It can be really anyone that wants to partially or fully fund a fellow. We recruit sponsors on a rolling basis throughout the year. They often have preferences or restrictions on what they want to fund. And it's ultimately the sponsor's decision on who gets funded. So, some project-based fellowship programs like Skadden, for example, you have 400 applicants for 30 spots. Well, they'll pick the best 30, right? Ours, it's more like a competition for every spot. You have one law firm coming and saying, I want to fund one project in DC focused on education issues. So then we pull all the applications that match their criteria, and there's one competition for that one spot. So every spot that's in our class is a separate competition in some ways. It's a lot of moving parts. And a recent trend that we have going on right now is co-sponsorships. And what this is when a corporate legal department teams up with one of its provider law firms to split the funding of a fellowship. And so we have corporations like Walmart, UPS, Walgreens, Microsoft, all funding fellows now. So the benefits to being a fellow at Equal Justice Works is we ask the host organizations to pay a salary comparable to a similarly experienced attorney, so an entering attorney. We provide up to $41,000 a year annually for that. If the organization pays more than $41,000, it's up to the organization to make up that difference. You get the health care coverage and any other fringe benefits that the organization provides. You do get access to Equal Justice Works loan repayment assistance. program. And we also do a training for the fellows every fall, and it gives you substantive and practical leadership and management skills to help you both in your fellowship and in your legal career. So we do that annually. And last but not least, you definitely get access to our national network of over 1,000 active and former fellows, which is nothing light. So what does the application process look like? Just rough overview. Basically, because you'll be submitting an application a full year ahead of when you would be starting, we encourage you to use your 2L year to actually start thinking about this. Start thinking about the types of projects you'd be interested in, what are some potential host organizations out there, and you start these conversations earlier rather than later. And then you work with the organization, usually over your 2L summer, your rising 3L summer, and that's when you're going to be drafting your proposal, and then applications are due in September. When the applications come in, we evaluate them. We evaluate them based on the strength of 3 components. Number 1 is the project itself. Number 2 is the candidate, and number 3 is the host organization. Now we weight the candidate and the project a little more than we do the host organization. And then we work with the sponsors to match proposals with their preferences. We schedule interviews on a rolling basis, basically from November to March, and we try to have the class finalized by April or May of every year. But if a sponsor comes to us in April and says they want to fund someone, we're not going to say no, right? So I'm going to wrap up here, but we have, just to give you an idea, you can look on our website of what specific interests sponsors have told us about already that they're interested in. For example, we have a foundation in New York City that wants to fund LGBT projects. We have some funders in California that are looking at rural issues, things like that. So all of this is on our website. And if we can get into more of that as well. So if you do have more questions about how to develop your proposal or questions on the traditional fellowship program itself, like I said, that these really in-depth webinars are going to be going on throughout the summer with Sarah Snick. And Sarah Snick would be a fantastic contact to have. Just real quick, just so that y'all know that they exist, we also have AmeriCorps Legal Fellowships. AmeriCorps was put into place during the Clinton administration. It's similar to a domestic Peace Corps. This year, we're going to be funding 40 AmeriCorps fellows working on veterans and disaster relief. So 36 will be in veterans issue, 4 will be on disaster relief. We selected host sites a couple of weeks ago. We finalized those. You can look on our website to see what host sites have been selected. Those organizations actually do the choosing. So we select where the fellows will be placed, and then the organizations themselves do their own competition. And so these are actually, and they're a year later too. So these right now the applications that are being put out there, or the positions that are being advertised for by these different host sites, will be starting this September. So the AmeriCorps Legal Fellowship is a good opportunity if you're a little later in the game and you're graduating from law school and you don't have a job yet. This is a great way to get in the door kind of immediately. So you can look at our website. There's tons of information there, and I can also answer more questions about this program during the questions time. And if you have questions on the AmeriCorps program, there's AmeriCorps mail at Equal Justice Works, or Kay Mason, Katrina Mason as our main contact there. But I'm happy to answer questions about any of this afterwards.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
Hillary?
Hi, so I'm Hillary Schneller. I'm an Equal Justice Works Fellowship at the National Women's Law Center here in DC. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my application process for all the fellowships I applied for, and then sort of try to boil down some tips or things people told me that I thought were helpful to pass on. So I applied for both Equal Justice Works and Skadden project-based fellowships with the Law Center. And in addition to that, sort of 2 other types of fellowships, some with organizations, like internal fellowships directly with that organization, and another type of fellowship program that I don't think there are a lot of, but I applied for. It's sort of a centralized fellowship program that will then match you with an organization. So the 2 I applied for for the Georgetown Women in Public Policy Fellowship Program and Law Students for Reproductive Justice. So both of those organizations, you apply to them and then they will place you with an organization doing that type of work in DC. And the Georgetown Women in Public Policy Fellowship Program, you don't have to be a Georgetown Law School graduate, you can be from anywhere. So I just wanted to throw those sort of different types of fellowships out there because there are many other types of fellowships besides a project-based fellowship. And then because Sterling is here to talk about equal justice work, I just wanted to throw out a couple of things about Skadden, with the caveat that I am not a Skadden fellow or, in any way involved in the organization. Because I applied for it, I think it's helpful to sort of hear some of the differences. Skadden is funded by one law firm, Skadden Arps, which is different from Equal Justice Works, which has sort of a host of different types of firms and corporations that provide the funding. Skadden describes itself as sort of launching a civil legal services for the poor, which may or may not be different than Equal Justice Works. I think they look for different things in the application. There are also some things Skadden won't fund. Like Equal Justice Works, it doesn't fund sort of standard criminal defense work. It also doesn't fund reproductive rights work. But kind of as Sterling mentioned with Equal Justice Works, there are ways around that. You can do healthcare for populations impacted, do re-entry work or sort of trafficking work or things like that. So there are ways to craft your project to avoid the areas you're not allowed to work in, but to still get at what you would like to do. And then, unlike Equal Justice Work, Skadden requires you to submit your transcript, which grades are part of the application. I have no idea how much they count, but just putting that out there as it's factored into your application, unlike the Equal Justice Works application. Okay, so what did I do? So during my Rising 3L summer is really when I started to think about this. I did not really think about it during my 2L year, just other things going on. So I spent a lot of intern lunch breaks looking for fellowship opportunities through PSJD, organizational websites, the fellowship websites. Both Equal Justice Works and Skadden have all of their past fellows listed with descriptions of their projects, where they went to law school, where they are a fellow, what state they're in, and a little description of what their project is. I talked to past internship supervisors, people who are sort of in the realm of work that I wanted to be doing as a fellow. And many organizations have sort of early deadlines for choosing who they want to sponsor for a project-based fellowship. A lot of those, I think, are listed on PSJD. So that can be sort of, you submit a cover letter or really just have an informational interview to talk to them about what type of project you'd want to do, or how you two fit together to develop a project together. And so those types of conversations can either be cover letters or cold calls for organizations that you want to work with, but you don't know if they're interested in having a fellow or have had any fellows in the past. So in addition to sort of that smorgasbord of calling up organizations I was interested in working with, I also approached the Law Center, which is where I spent my 2L summer as an intern. So they had an outline of a project and decided they wanted to, fund a fellow for this sort of roughly outlined project. I submitted my application to them to be considered to be sponsored by them around the last day of my internship. Went off vacation at the middle of August, and then September 1st, I got a call saying, yes, we would like to sponsor you. Let's develop this project together. 14 days later, we submitted our Equal Justice Works application. So it was a lot of work to go back and forth. There were a lot of track changes, editing documents every day back and forth, but we definitely developed the project together. So sort of one thing about that is, although I was an intern there and definitely had a connection to the organization, I don't think you definitely don't have to have been an intern. The act of collaborating on developing the project together really, I think, showed in my application, regardless of whether I had been an intern. So I think Just throwing that out there because I may be an example of a person who was an intern, but you definitely don't have to be. Okay, so then here are some sort of 5 things that people told me I wish I had known or found helpful. So how do you start developing a project? Where do you start? Think about your dream job. Someone told me you really can't fake this in the interview. You have to have a genuine interest in what you're doing, in working at the organization you eventually choose. Where do you want to be geographically? What populations do you want to work with? Think about your clinics or internships or classes you've liked. What type of work do you want to do? Is it all direct services? Is there some sort of policy advocacy mixed in there? What types of work do you want to do? With that said, though, also have an open mind to be collaborative with your host organization. They're the ones who have an insight into the population they work with and the types of work that's already being done and what a new project could be to fill a need that's not being worked on yet. Okay, number 2, start early. So that's, again, I said I didn't start thinking about this until my 2L summer. It's always good to start early. I think part of why I didn't start was it's just really hard to think about what you want to be doing after you graduate from law school when you haven't even done your 3L year, you haven't studied for the bar. It just seems really far away. But if you can try to put off or, end the procrastination, very good. And sort of with that said, don't be daunted by not having a fleshed out project idea before you start talking to organizations. I think it is a process that you work on together. So if you have an idea of, I really want to do women's rights work, start talking to organizations that do the work you want to do, even if you don't have I want to work, on implementing the Affordable Care Act for women very specifically, in this state. I think having a give and take there can help you, get the ball rolling. Number 3, I think I mentioned this before, but looking at the fellowship websites and even if you're not going to apply to Skadden, look at the Skadden website. Even if you're not going to look at Equal Justice Works, look at their website to get a feel of what a project-based fellowship looks like. And you can also make contacts with the people at your school who have had a fellowship or organizations that have had fellows before. 4, once you're writing your application, I found it really helpful to have someone either not in law school or not in the weeds on the issue that I was working on read my application. You're trying to convince people at law firms or corporations or whomever who don't automatically have an understanding of the kind of work you want to do necessarily. So having it be understandable and compelling to people not in the weeds and who are not already convinced was a helpful perspective. And then 5, very important, remember that the process is, to some extent, a crapshoot. It's partly luck, it's partly, if you don't get a fellowship, it doesn't mean you're not able to do public interest work in any way. There are so few fellowships out there and so many people who want to do public interest work that even if you do everything quote unquote right, you may still not get a fellowship, and it's not the end of the world. I think that's my number 5.
Thank you so much. David?
First of all, people probably saw me nodding along. That is some really useful advice. I hope people were really listening. And I saw other people nodding along on the panel, so really glad you shared all that. In fact, you did a lot of the work for me, which is great, but really, really good insights. So I'm David Zisser. I'm with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law in the Community Development Project. I'm also on the Fellowship Committee. We have someone from each project area on our committee. My boss didn't want to do it, so she has me do it. And I'm glad to. I really like it. We have 5, just real quickly, we have 5 project areas: employment discrimination, educational opportunities, community development, fair housing, and voting rights. And if people didn't grab one, there should be a few more of these outside, and if there aren't, you can have my last one here. So if you want to learn a little bit more about us, and our website also has lots of information, obviously. Quick, just a couple relevant background pieces. I did a fellowship right after law school. That's not why I'm here, but it was with the New York City Housing Department. So it was a little bit non-traditional, and that's partly to say that, you know, look at non-traditional fellowship opportunities too. It's sort of a staff attorney type fellowship, and they look for not only law students but also graduate students. I applied for EJW, got a great sponsor at the Legal Aid Foundation of LA, and had an interview with a very scary big law firm and bombed it. Just like absolutely bombed my interview. So that was the end of that. I walked out, I literally walked out the door going back to the drawing board. I knew I'd bombed it. And that should not be to scare anyone. I do think it was a lesson for me. I think I was adequately prepared. I do think it's a lesson in sort of simplifying a project and making it sort of digestible to law firms that aren't familiar with your particular issue area. And I do think it's good to have sort of other folks might disagree, but sort of a sexy component to a project to give it some appeal. Mine was a little bit wonky. The good news is I found something else, so it wasn't the end of the line for me. So I'm really here to talk, though, about sort of the organization, the host organization's perspective about, so I'm going to talk about what types of fellowships we have, and we're, just as an example of what some other organizations will also have, I think we're pretty typical. And then also what we look for in an applicant, and Hillary touched on some of that, so it's pretty consistent. We are currently hosting a Skadden Fellow, and we ordinarily also host an EJW Fellow. We're not hosting an EJW Fellow the upcoming year because decisions were made on high on up that we could not afford the fringe benefits. Skadden doesn't require you to do that, so it's a free fellow for us. We're going to make a year-by-year decision about this, so don't rule out the Lawyers Committee in the future. We have had EJW Fellows before, and we've had Skadden Fellows before, and they've worked out really nicely. We also have an in-house fellowship called the Lindsay Fellowship, named after George Lindsay, and there's a bunch of information about the Lindsay Fellowship on our website under our fellowship tab. I do want to say, unfortunately for the 3Ls in the room who haven't already applied, our deadline to apply was 3 days ago, sort of crappy timing. But for the rising 2Ls, I hope you'll keep us in mind for next year. We get about 100 applicants a year, so it's very competitive. And so I'll explain sort of what we look for. Not all 100 applications are equal, you could say. So we do some quick sort of vetting, and then we do a more careful look at some of the more competitive apps. We also host what I guess you could call school-based fellowships. Is there a technical term? So we have a fellow in my project right now, Melissa, who at Cornell started a public interest fellowship at, is anyone from Cornell here by any chance? No. She's the first one, and she chose us, and we chose her. And she's free for us as well. So that's working out nicely. And so some schools may have that kind of thing. We also host fellows, who sort of more informal fellowships, basically volunteer attorneys. So if you're sort of in between jobs, it's a good thing to consider to keep your resume fresh. And also some law firms place their young lawyers with us for a short amount of time. So those are the type of fellowships we look for, or that we have. A few sort of key things that we look for in applications. And there may be slight disagreements on this from other people, but I think this is pretty much how we operate at the Lawyers Committee. So we do look at the reputation or ranking of the schools to some degree for EJW and Skadden, not because we value that, but we are under the impression that the law firms do for the most part. So it's not to say we won't sponsor. In fact, our current Skadden is from Rutgers, which I don't know where they're in the ranking, but they're not top 10 or anything. And so it really depends on the candidate's story, the project, the fit, but that comes into play at some point. We also, the most important thing that we look for is a consistent commitment to social justice and public interest work, and we place a great value on having a lot of great internships and volunteer experiences, and I'm a huge advocate of sort of maximizing those opportunities, clinics obviously too, and really utilizing your summers to do public interest work. Some people disagree, think law firms are the way to go now and then. That's not what I would recommend. Another thing that I really stress, and that comes up a lot in the fellowship committee, is focus in your resume. It's sort of a double-edged sword a little bit. When we get someone who's got lots of great civil rights experience or social justice experience, but is sort of all over the place in terms of issue area, it's very hard to sort of see what that person really knows and is passionate about, and how do we form a project with this person, even though it shows a lot of great commitment. And that's not to say you should pigeonhole yourself in one area, which is essentially what I've done. Yeah, I'm stuck, basically. But, you know, to have 2 items on your resume that are the same field. You don't have to have everything the same field, but have some consistency so that you can really draw out some expertise, I guess you could say. The last thing that I'll mention, I think, is your proposed project. In our initial application, we sort of have a 3-part application. We have you submit an online form and some basic materials, including a transcript and a cover letter and references, I think. And then we narrow that pool down to, I think, something around 10 applicants, and we do some interviews just with the fellowship committee. And then we narrow that down to 3, and those 3 go to our executive director and our chief counsel for an interview. And so you're not required to have a proposed project at that first stage. However, I do think it shows initiative and sort of creativity to come to us with some, you know, skeletal idea. Even if it's not exactly what you'll end up doing, it shows some amount of creativity and expertise. A good way to sort of vet that, and I think Hillary touched on this, is to give us a call. If you are doing community development as your proposal, call me or my boss up, or, you know, at another organization, for instance, and ask us what we think about the proposal. I got a cold email the other day and ended up talking with a young woman who wants to do tenants' rights. And, you know, it was a great idea. We were able to flesh it out, and maybe she'll do it, maybe she won't. But now I know who she is, and she'll have more guidance about what she proposes, and it'll be more relevant to what we do. So I think that's really pretty important. I think folks, just like informational interviews, I think some people get intimidated about doing that, or think that we're getting called all the time. It's not happening. We're happy to talk to people, and I think it'll work out for everybody in the end. So I think I'll leave it there. That's basically what we're looking for, and obviously I'm happy to answer questions afterwards.
Thanks so much, David. Katie?
All right, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie DeHon, and I'm a program associate on the Education and Outreach team at the Partnership for Public Service. So a bit of clarity about what my organization actually is. We are a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization that works closely with the federal government on a number of human capital issues. So I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of my own organization, but in terms of all the agencies that I work with on a daily basis to make sure that they can recruit and hire top talent, which I'm sure, as you know, law is actually a mission-critical profession across several agencies in government right now, in the sense that even though there may be budget cuts, there may be a sequester, government will always have need for lawyers. And compounded on top of that, you may have heard that in the past few years there have been murmurs of a retirement tsunami coming for the federal workforce. I would like to say that the waves are rising quite a bit. In the first 2 months of this year, the Office of Personnel Management actually received the number of retirement notifications that they thought they would receive for the entirety of 2013. So needless to say, government is hiring despite any headlines or anything else. So, just a second. There we go. I don't think that I need to necessarily extol in too much detail the benefits of the federal government to this group. I think that you're all here because you want to make a difference in your profession. Not only that, government affords tremendous variety and opportunity in terms of its subject matter, location, really everything. My organization actually yearly holds a award ceremony in which we honor federal service, or federal servants who have done really outstanding things. So I'm thinking of one person in particular. It was a collaboration between HUD and the VA in terms of actually ending veterans' homelessness by 2016. The federal servant who worked to actually cap the oil spill in the Gulf. Really pressing issues and things like that you can be working on with the federal government. So actually, because you all are so interested in public service, I would be interested here, just by a show of hands, how many of you this summer or in the previous summer have interned or worked with a federal agency? Awesome. Really quickly, if you wouldn't mind just throwing out the names of those agencies. Okay, FTC. Others? DOJ. Others? Awesome. Keep them coming. Solid. Civil rights? Great. White House. All right, cool. So it really runs the gamut in terms of issue areas and other things. And I think, too, that speaks to the different types of specialties that you can practice with the federal government. So with that in mind, the government is currently hiring for both practicing and non-practicing attorneys. If you do want to practice law with the federal government, you have the advantage of Schedule A as a hiring authority on your side. That means that only lawyers are actually applying for these positions. Additionally, if you maybe want to apply your law degree to something other than practicing law in the federal government, there are a number of really great competitive service positions available. And you can find these at usajobs.gov. How many of you have actually been on usajobs.gov and applied there? How many of you maybe think it might be a black hole? All right, that's fair. And I just had to address that because I think that is something that actually is changing with hiring reform. It is getting better. The time to hire from when an application is actually released to the date someone is actually in the position has gone down quite a bit in the past 2 years and continues to decrease. So that's something that you can look forward to as you apply to federal positions. The other thing that I will go into a little bit more detail about, if you are applying for just competitive service positions, typically you will need a federal resume for these positions, and these are typically a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth, and really there's a focus there on tailoring the resume to the actual position. But I will get into that a bit later. For now, I want to talk about all legal jobs. So these can be both competitive, legal or non-practicing jobs, and these are under the Pathways programs. So as I mentioned before, there's a huge emphasis right now in government on developmental programs, and this is because they really want to bring up that future workforce, seeing as so many people are retiring right now. And these new programs were actually a result of hiring reform. So the internship program for those second rising third years or second years if you have another summer before you graduate. These are paid opportunities to intern at federal agencies and really explore different career paths. You will be assigned a mentor typically in these programs. You will have training and development built into your time there. And the best part is, at the end, if you have successfully completed the internship and fulfilled the hour requirements listed on the screen, you would be eligible for conversion. So just curious, anyone in the room actually in a Pathways internship right now? All right, that doesn't surprise me because these actually just rolled out this fall, and a lot of the positions were just posted this spring and will be continuing to be posted for as long as these programs exist. So really encourage you to take a look at them. If you do ever get a Pathways position, really encourage you, first day of work, talk about what will get you converted. Obviously, there are a lot of environmental factors that come into play, budget constraints, other things like that, but just making sure that you know explicitly what will get you a full-time offer or give you the eligibility and the potential to be converted one day. That said, obviously there still are quite a few volunteer positions that are available at many federal agencies. And these obviously kind of run the gamut in terms of the level and kind of scope of what you could be working on. And I'm sure that I think that you all are your own best resources to kind of network with each other to see what people at other agencies are working on. All right. Next up, recent graduates program. So this one is actually completely new, and what I think is really the hallmark of the Pathways programs. This too is a very heavy emphasis on development throughout your time there. You would be going to an orientation. You would receive 40 hours of training and development in your time there. You would complete an individual development plan, as well as be assigned a mentor. Ultimately, as with the internship program, at the end, you do have that conversion eligibility. So people who would qualify for this are individuals with undergraduate or graduate degrees from qualifying educational institutions. So I wager to say that most everyone in the room would be eligible. And you must apply within 2 years of degree or certification. And this is because, more or less, with traditional competitive service, there is so much value with experience. But if the government is going to fill this gap that it has at the entry level, how are they going to do that if I'm right out of law school and I'm supposed to compete with someone who has 7 years of experience working directly with the issue at hand? This really narrows the applicant pool, so you are competing against your peers and you have a shot at these positions. So really encourage all of you to take a look at these. If you go to usajobs.gov and type in recent graduate in the what search capability, everything will populate. And then you can narrow the search by agency, by location, really whatever suits your fancy. Finally, or actually, before I start with PMF, any questions? No? Okay. We'll have time for questions at the end as well. As I'm sure many of you know, the Presidential Management Fellows Program is the government's most prestigious fellowship program. This is a 2-year leadership development program. And as with the other two, huge focus on orientation, on training and development, completing that individual development plan, getting that mentor, and then what I think is really great is having a rotation to another agency or even to another nonprofit that deals with kind of governmental issues. So actually, the Partnership for Public Service would be an eligible organization for a PMF to come rotate to for, say, 6 months or even longer than that. And you can actually do multiple rotations. So if you really have quite a few agencies that pique your interest, this would be the program to do this. The application for this will go live this fall, and really encourage you to go to pmf.gov to stay in tune and in touch with those timelines. All right, so really quickly going to give you a quick overview of this application process. There is a typical online application that you can go ahead and fill out. From there, if you advance forward, there will be an online assessment and then an in-person assessment. And then hopefully you would be declared a PMF finalist, and this would permit you to participate in the PMF job fair. Just because you're a finalist doesn't necessarily mean that you are a fellow. You still have to go to the job fair and still kind of have to interact with agencies. So that is definitely an option. I'm running low on time, so I'm going to kind of wrap it up in 30 seconds. But quick tips for USA Jobs for all those people that think it's a black hole. Here is how you can do the best in actually creating those applications. Number one, print out your job application. Highlight the power verbs. Highlight those key nouns. Make sure that those appear in your federal resume. Make sure that you have that agency contact information. If in 2 months you don't hear anything, you need to give them a call. What else? Make sure that you tailor your search to only jobs that you are qualified for. So for those of you who are graduating from law school right now, that would mean that you qualify for a general schedule position of 9 or 11 most likely. And finally, I'm sure that we can send this out. This will help you tailor your search in terms of the series code. So this is the actual subject matter that you would be dealing with in legal professions. So last but not least, some resources. Go Government that is a brand new job seeker and student resource. This will go through federal resumes in detail, all the good stuff, as well as best places to work if you want to see where employees in the government are really satisfied. And then finally, really quickly, some PMF resources. Really great comprehensive resources, a lot of really good clips of current PMFs, former PMFs, what people are doing in 5 years after the program, so you get a sense for that. All right.
Thank you so
Sorry.
much. No. Thank you all for the wonderful presentations. I'm going to ask you one question in a second, but if any of the folks in the room want to get up behind the mics to ask your questions of the panelists, feel free to start coming up to them. There's mics there, and I think we're trying to mic as much as possible so that the recording can pick up your fantastic questions as well as the fantastic answers. So a quick question for all of you, quickly, if you could answer. When other people were talking, or when you were thinking about the other issues that were coming up, or just your own experience, or things you forgot to say maybe, what is one tip or one thing that you think students and the other folks in the room should be doing right now to set themselves up as a great candidate for your thing, whatever it is?
I can start. The number one tip I would say is get as much clinical and experiential learning as you can get. I assume that you're all in some sort of summer placement. Do as much actual legal work as you can while you're in law school. Not only will it give you the skills that you'll need for your application, for your project, but it broadens your experience within the legal field. Try a clinic that you didn't think was something you were interested in. Get even if it's 10-hour a week, 5-10-hour a week volunteership somewhere that's outside of your box a little. It broadens. It gives you experience in a lot of different legal fields that will that can only grow round out, I guess, your experiences. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other tips?
Yeah, I'll go. That's all really, really good advice. On the clinics, I feel like I ask people if they're doing a clinic. They say, yeah, I'm going to do a clinic. I think you should do 2 clinics. They're more interesting. They're more valuable than classes. You'll remember it a lot more, and it'll look better on your resume. So definitely the experiential stuff. I'll just repeat one thing. Reach out to people. Do informational interviews now. Informational interviews, I think, are pretty much, and I've talked to someone else about this and she's heard my spiel, probably the most important way to actually get a job. I mean, you're going to be making connections, learning about organizations, getting your name out there. I told you, we're going to be looking at 100 fellowship applications. It's an easy way to screen people. If I see a name that I recognize, somebody I know is smart, I've talked to, they're not guaranteed to get a fellowship, of course, but at least we'll look extra carefully at that person's application. I think it's really important. And the other thing that came to mind is get organized, early, not like Hillary apparently. Not that it didn't hurt her, but build a little spreadsheet with the organizations that interest you, what their deadlines are, whether they have in-house fellowships, whether they sponsor EGW, Skadden, who the contact is, when you followed up with them last, that kind of thing. Be organized and stick to that. I did want to mention 2 quick things that I didn't mention before. I said we look at schools for EJW and Skadden. I was supposed to say we don't really care for our in-house Lindsay Fellowship. And in fact, in some ways, we almost like reserve it for people who aren't from a top 10. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Also, internships, Hillary touched on this. It's not necessary to have interned at your host organization at all, but of course it helps. So, prioritize that one of those organizations if you can. But our our previous Lindsay fellow did not intern with us. Our Skadden fellow did not intern with us. So, but our current Lindsay fellow did.
Thank you. Any other advice?
I'm just going to totally underscore the clinics and the informational interview points. The clinic, best thing I did in law school by far. Informational interviews is something I definitely was intimidated to do and didn't do enough. And just the worst thing someone can do is not respond or say they don't have time, which they won't say. So just go for it. And then I just, in thinking of as you're developing your project, either, I'm not sure if it's before you have your sponsor or when you're or your host organization or after you've had that person, but contact Equal Justice Works, Sarah Snick, to talk about fleshing out your project. And then with Skadden, I don't know if people have heard this before, but call Susan Butler Plum. Her phone number's on the Skadden website. Call her to have a conversation. She's the person who runs the Fellowship Foundation.
She's the gatekeeper.
Yes, and she cares so much about fellows and the fellowship projects, and just like the Equal Justice Works people care about matching you with the right person and getting your project funded. These people are your cheerleaders, so they can help you know what's going to work, what's not going to work, how to sort of frame your project in the right way.
Yeah, because we are the ones, just to reiterate that, we are the ones coming from the private side as well. We're talking to the private funders. We know what they're looking for, and I'm always happy to help applicants, especially we kind of divide up the country into different portfolios for sponsor relations. And so, I work with people in Chicago a lot, and I'll have applicants who are looking to work in Chicago who will, Sarah will put them in contact with me, and I'm like, okay, listen, here's the 4 potential sponsors we're looking at for you. If you want to do this issue, this is how you're going to make it, more attractive to them. It's, instead of you're working with incarcerated mothers, you're working on domestic violence issues and family law issues for a population that is disenfranchised. There's different ways to frame it.
Any other advice, Katie?
So I would just say 2 things really quickly. Number 1, if you are interested in any of these Pathways programs, get on USA Jobs after this, create an account, create a resume, and then set up a saved search. These positions are very competitive, and because of that, they have incredibly short windows sometimes. So if you actually it's on the left side of the menu there. It should just say Save Searches, or if you see a position you really like, you can set up so that you get emails when similar positions come up. If you can fire off your resume and your application as soon as possible, that will be to your advantage. And then finally, what I've heard time and time again from HR specialists and hiring managers across government is that your resume will get you in the door. There are a lot of people that can do any one job, but what you need to do and what's going to set you apart is your passion. I think Hillary touched on this really well earlier, is just making sure that you show why you are the absolute best person for it. So,
thank you so much. Well, it looks like we have a couple of questions, and I've seen a few more hands if folks want to come down to the mics. If the mic isn't on, because sometimes they go to sleep. It is. Okay.
It's on.
Elizabeth?
Katie, I just was wondering, you mentioned federal agencies, being placed at federal agencies, but does that include members of Congress as well? Could you be placed with a legislator? Or?
So actually, these are just for federal agencies under the executive branch, though I do know a number of resources related to more legislative kind of positions and things of that nature, which I can certainly send out in the follow-up to this.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. I appreciated everyone's comments, and I have a question about what advice you have for someone like me who's actually an experienced attorney looking to make a transition. And I have to admit, I do get discouraged because I'll see, over and over again, fellowship opportunities, and it'll say, for people 1 or 2 years out of law school. I wonder if you know anything or know any resources for where I might look. Someone at WCL, Washington Council, has told me there are such opportunities, but I haven't found them.
Are you in the private sector now, or you're already in the public?
I'm in a nonprofit now.
Right. So I know that, just speaking for Equal Justice Works, ours is just for transitioning from private to public, or starting, with public. But if you've only been in the public sector for a couple of years, you would still definitely be eligible.
Actually, I've worked on the Hill. I've worked at federal agency in the executive branch. I've worked in private practice. So I've done a lot of different things. So do you know, are there organizations or resources where I can look, or are they just really non-existent for experienced attorneys?
Right.
Unless, like you say, they're
Right.
in a private, maybe at a law firm. Or
The only thing I'll say, I don't know the answer to your question, but I will say that if you have the means, we take volunteer attorneys, who want to, try practicing in one of our practice areas. I know we've had at least a couple recently. We actually have one right now. So, that obviously it's not a guarantee to get hired, but it's a good resume builder and gap filler, and a good way to make connections in the field that you're interested in.
that makes sense. Oh, and may I just ask, is it Katie Daunt? Is it pronounced Daunt?
DeHon, yeah.
Yes, I just have a question out of curiosity. 'Cause
Sure.
I've worked in the federal government. I had this idea that it was actually an aspect of appropriations law that the federal government could not accept free service. I was just a little surprised that you mentioned there are volunteer opportunities with the federal government. Maybe the law was changed, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. There are definitely unpaid internships and things of that nature with the government. I would love to speak with you afterwards, though, a bit more about the appropriation laws that you're referencing, though.
Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, thank you all for being here this evening. My name's Lindsay. I'm also at Georgetown, so I don't know what's going on. Stand back a little bit further. I have 3 quick questions about the Equal Justice Works Fellowship.
Sure.
I guess Sterling would be best for it, but if anyone has the answers. First, can you apply after a clerkship?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I assume so. It's
Yes.
recent. Second, can you apply multiple times in a row if you apply once and you don't get
Yes.
fellowship? Great.
Yep. And we can work with you, if you don't get it, and kind of work with you to tailor and make sure that you're putting your best application forward the second time, especially.
That's great to know.
And it's actually helpful to us too if you get to the point of interviewing your first time and don't get it. It helps us the next year. This happens actually fairly often. Funnily enough, our first fellow that was chosen for the class of 2013 was someone who was in the process last year. All of us were trying to see this person funded. He was at an organization that was actually founded by a former Equal Justice Works fellow. And she was going to be a supervising attorney. He was fantastic, off the charts. We couldn't find him a funder. So he was able to volunteer with the organization for a year under a bridge grant I think he went to Harvard, from Harvard. Reapplied. He was our first one funded this year. So it was a great redeeming story, and those happen a lot, which is very nice.
That's great. And final question, can you apply with more than one organization sponsor, or do you just have to pick one?
Just one. You can only pick one, but host organizations can put forth more than one application, more than one applicant. So basically, we will have certain organizations are very large and can host more than one fellow at a time. Our role there is if the organization is putting forth more than one candidate, they're certifying to us that if multiple are chosen, they will host all that are chosen. So basically, they can't pick and choose. They can't put forward 3 candidates, all 3 get funded, and then they say, oh no, actually we only want this one. But yeah, you as an applicant have to choose one organization to work with on your project.
But you can apply in the spring or summer to multiple organizations and then just submit one fellowship application.
Correct, to Equal Justice Works, correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Wait, I have a follow-up question. If that's okay. You can sit down if you want. But, I feel like there's a debate with fellows and organizations about whether, for Skadden and EJW, you get, like, we don't typically sponsor someone for both.
Right.
We'll choose someone different for each. But the Washington Lawyers Committee, for instance, sponsors the same person for both.
Yes.
And I can see it being awkward if you do what we do and, what the Washington Lawyers Committee does. If their fellow is selected by both EJW and Skadden, they have to make a choice. I guess I'm wondering if you have any advice.
So, so this happens a lot where, I mean, like Hillary, like where she applied for with the Law Center, right? As to both Skadden and Equal Justice Works. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So you have
But
one
also the difference
candidate.
between, yeah.
And so the difference, so then it's the onus is on the candidate then to choose, right? What do I want to be, a Skadden fellow or an Equal Justice Works fellow? The differences between the program, the main one that is usually the reason why people will choose Skadden is they have a higher salary. I think it's 46. If I'm not mistaken, and please don't quote me on that. Susan Butler-Plum can definitely let you know. And a lot of times Skadden's, just because our program is rolling, our admissions are rolling, our decisions are rolling, Skadden usually lets people know earlier. So a lot of times it's the bird in the hand, right? So you get the Skadden offer, so you just take it. However, we do have instances every year where one of our first sponsors who chooses picks someone who's up for a Skadden, and they choose Equal Justice Works. So it's usually by default, they'll go for Skadden first and then stick around.
Yeah, go ahead. Hello, my name is Caitlin, and I just had a question about fleshing out project ideas for project-based fellowships. You mentioned reaching out, I guess, to EJW fellowship coordinators or something. What point in time would you suggest doing that? I'm a rising 2L this year.
So before you reach out to Equal Justice Works, it's good to at least have some sort of idea. I mean, definitely not when you're like, okay, here are the 5 different areas I'm thinking about, because just our bandwidth, we're not able to take all of those. But Sarah Snick is an expert on this. She's been running this program for a very long time, and she is really good if you have maybe a couple different ideas that you're choosing between, or maybe a couple different host organizations that you're choosing between. She could give you some good insight if you're trying to decide, should I do all direct services, or what sort of advocacy pieces should I put in it. But I would say definitely have some sort of fleshed out idea. So as for timing, if you have a great idea now and you want to start talking about it now, by all means, contact us. But otherwise, get something a little more concrete, I would say. Does that help?
So, sort of, I guess, what do you mean by what does concrete in your mind mean? Because you had mentioned someone contacted you with a kind of skeletal idea and fleshed it out.
Sure.
So
Usually it'll be, I would say you have the population you want to work with, the clients you want to serve, you have the way you want to serve them. And you're trying to figure out, or, if you have those 2 pieces, that's the main components, right? You have how you're going to provide the legal services, and you have who it is you're trying to serve. If you have that fleshed out, that's a lot, right? I would say that's plenty to start a conversation at least.
Thanks.
I'll just add real quick. You mentioned sort of the way in which, I know the Lawyers Committee and probably other organizations like sort of a multifaceted approach. So certainly direct legal services is important, and maybe sort of the heart and soul of the application, but you also want to think about impact, policy advocacy, community education and outreach, and think about how you can have sort of a multifaceted, connected, coordinated approach.
Right, because and that really underscores the difference between fellowships and a staff attorney position, right? We can fund staff attorney positions who will be doing direct legal services, and we could put all our money towards that, and maybe one day we'd make a dent in the justice gap. But the point of fellowships are you can have creativity, and you can really approach it from a multifaceted way. And we love seeing creativity in applications. We love seeing really neat models of service, a delivery service. So yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, so this question is for Katie. you mentioned that the amount of time between when an application is, or when a position is posted on USA Jobs, and then when the report for duty date has gone down dramatically in the last couple of years. Do you have any figures that would be helpful, average time or
Absolutely. So the last average that I saw, at least on this, and this was probably 6 to 8 months ago, so I certainly hope it's gone down since then, is average 82 days. Time from when it's posted to time when they actually have to hire.
Okay, and is there a way to find sort of agency-specific figures on that?
Not that I'm aware of that would be kind of public, but certainly I can delve into that a little bit further and get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come down. Hey everybody, I'm Dana Down, I'm a Washington lawyer, and I wanted to share that Christine Jackson, who is now one of our co-sponsors, and who got caught in a terrible traffic jam, had a chance to talk about PSJD and what a wonderful resource that is for you as you start researching and applying for fellowship. Hi, so I have a really big mouth. Is there anyone who cannot hear me? Okay, I'm Christina Jackson. I'm at NOUT, and one of my bailiwicks is PSJD, which is a whole lot of really good stuff for you. What's going to be really important for you right now is 2 pieces of it. The first is going to be a search mechanism where you can look for both job postings and you can search for employer profiles. And that part is really important because I think a lot of people miss that piece. When you are thinking about doing your environmental law, doing your immigration, doing your children's rights, whatever it is, and you're thinking, okay, I know maybe one organization and I want to go out to Oregon and do immigration. I'm going to talk to somebody from Oregon, there's a big immigration movement out there. Who am I going to do that with? Search the employer profiles. You can search by a lot of different parameters. You can look for type of organization, practice area, geography, whatever it is. And that's going to help you figure out